going to create a booklet that's based on the elements of art. So it's like a review or just like a little pocket notebook for you to keep track of the different elements of art that you're going to be using in future projects. For this project, you will need a piece of paper. Copy paper will suffice, an eraser, a pencil, any black pen or fine tip marker, crayons, markers, and colored pencils. This booklet is made out of one sheet of paper that is folded in a certain way. I'm going to show you the steps, and it's cut in the center here. There's a little slit, and when you put it all together, it creates a booklet. If you have trouble following those directions, you can take one piece of paper, cut it in half, put the two halves together, and you could staple or tape it together so that you have a booklet that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sides from the front to the back. On the cover, you can decorate it however you would like. It should say the elements of art, and you're going to write the 7 elements that we're going to focus on: value, line, shape, texture, space, color, and form. The first one we're going to start with is line. The first thing you need to do is fold your paper long ways. So match the corners up and fold it. The next fold is going to be taking your paper and folding it corner to corner this way. You're going to open up your paper, and then you're going to fold it in to the center from the left and fold it in to the center on the right side. Now comes the tricky part. The tricky part is you need to cut a slit along the center 2 rectangles. So you'll need a scissor for this, and you can ask your parents for assistance. The easiest way that I found was to take my scissor and just cut a little sliver off the top of the center section, just like so. Not too much. You don't want to cut too much. So you're going to cut a sliver of paper so that it creates a hole in the top, but it doesn't go all the way across the top. Then you'll have 2 pieces of paper. You want to keep the paper in one solid piece with a slit in the middle. So now you're going to fold the middle section in the front forward, and the middle section in the back stays folded this way. And you're just going to collapse the booklet together like so. Press down the folds, and now you have a little pocket notebook that you can sketch on. I made a straight line across the top of my paper so that I have a space to write the element that we're focusing on. So we're focusing on line, and you would write line above your line here. And I even wrote down some of the different various types of lines: diagonal, curve, wavy, zigzag, straight, thin, thick. And those are the types of lines I used in my design. The next step, you would take your black marker and outline your line design with black. And if you don't have black, just use a dark marker or a dark pen. You want to vary the line quality, so you're going to have thin lines and thick lines, okay? And you just want to show that your line is an identifiable path created by a moving point in space. It's one-dimensional, but you know, you can really create a very interesting design by varying the different types of lines: curved, wavy, zigzag, straight, thin, thick, and diagonal lines, and the thinness and thickness, the line quality. So you come up with a really cool design. And you don't have to copy mine, you can create your own. The next element of art is going to be shape, which makes sense because a shape is an area enclosed by a line. So we already know how to draw our lines, and we practice different types of lines. Now we're going to draw shapes, and there's two different types of shapes that we're going to be drawing. We're going to be drawing geometric shapes. Those are more mathematical. They have like straight edges on some of them. They're crisp, clean edges. They have names: circle, oval, triangle, rectangle, diamond, square, to name a few. And we're going to also focus on organic shapes, shapes found in nature, like biomorphic shapes like an amoeba or a splat of water, leaves, clovers, other types of leaves, or coral, seashells, and lightning bolts. So these shapes we find in nature, they don't always necessarily have names. We attach names to them. And they're more free-flowing shapes, okay? So the geometric shapes are more mathematical and precise, and these shapes are more free-flowing, and we can draw them however we like. To make your booklet a little bit more interesting, it would be fun for you to color in your shapes, and you can use any colors. There's not specific colors. You don't have to use yellow for a circle. It's totally up to you. You can shade them in. You can play around with colored pencil depending on your skill level. So, you know, try to make your book look a little bit more interesting, and you can color this in. The next element we're going to focus on is color. And we have primary colors, secondary colors. That's all we're going to fit into our color wheel on our review booklet. We have the primaries, which are red, yellow, and blue. We have the secondaries, which are orange, green, and purple. And the way we place them on the color wheel is specific, and one half will be warm colors and the other half will use the cool colors. Basically, the definition of color is it's an element of art that's produced when light striking an object is reflected back to the eye. Hue is the pure color, the name of the pure color, and value is the lightness or darkness of the color. We're not really going to focus on that here. And intensity is the brightness or darkness of the hue. So we're going to trace a circle, which is going to make it a little bit easier. I mean, you can sketch your circle, but if you're having trouble, you can just take any, found object from home. It could be a lid for something that'll fit on here, and you're just going to trace around that shape to make your circle. And then I want to show you how to divide the space up. So you're going to take a straight edge and you're going to eyeball it, put it in the center of your, you could measure your, so it's almost 2 inches. So like 1 1/8. You could find the center and then kind of draw a line down the center. So you're going to split it in half, but then from there we kind of have to draw an X. And you want to try to divide almost like pizza pie slices up as best you can. One piece might look a little bigger than some others, and it's fine. And the next step is to label them. So first we want to write on the top color, because that's our element that we're focusing on. And then we're going to write primary, Primary, and you can write them down: red, yellow, and blue. You don't want to put them right next to one another, so you're going to kind of skip a space. So I just, for identification purposes, I put an R for red, then I skip one. I'm going to put a Y for yellow, skip one, and a B for blue. I used capital letters for the primaries, and then for the secondaries, which are orange, green, and violet. You could write purple. I'm going to use lowercase, so red and yellow when mixed together make orange. Yellow and blue when mixed together make green. Blue and red when mixed together make purple or violet, okay? That's how you would, so you don't forget which colors to make them, and then you're going to color in your color wheel with the appropriate color: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet or purple. You can also write on this side the word warm, because this side of the color wheel is the warm color scheme. And on this side, you could write the word cool, and that'll help you to remember at least the primary and secondary colors, and the order that they go in on the color wheel, and which ones are warm and which ones are cool. So color that in, and then we'll move on to the next one. The next element we're going to focus on is texture. And the trick that artists have to do, especially when working two-dimensionally, is they have to use lines and shapes and shading and different tricks to create implied texture. Implied texture is when it looks like it might feel like something, but when you actually touch it, it doesn't feel like this is wood grain. It doesn't feel bumpy, but it just looks like the lines in the wood. This would be the texture of a feather. It doesn't feel like a feather because it's not actual texture. It's implied. It's an illusion. And when we're working two-dimensionally, when we're drawing and painting on a flat surface and not making a sculpture, our textures have to be created with different techniques. So we're going to practice 6 different textures. So we're going to divide the space up. So what I've done here is I've just divided the space up into 6 boxes, so I can create a different texture in each box. So you could follow along with the textures that I created, and I'm going to recreate these, or you could try to create your own textures using lines, shapes, and combining lines and shapes to create different types of textures. So here we go. So I'm going to start with just wiggly lines, vertical wiggly lines. When you're creating texture, like a good example is like cat fur. If you were, say, drawing a picture of a cat or any furry animal, the lines that you would draw or paint to create the hair, that's texture. That's implied texture. If you were making a sculpture and you wanted to put hair on your sculpture, which is a 3-dimensional work of art that can be seen from all sides, you can feel it. You could put fake hair on that cat or whatever you were sculpting, and that would be actual texture. You would actually be able to feel it, but this is implied. So this isn't necessarily hair. I'm just making texture of a bumpy surface. I'm going to work on the 5 other textures, so you can see these wavy lines. They kind of make it look like that really gives you the feeling. It's like an optical illusion, and it gives you the feeling that it's really going up and down and up and down. And see how some of the lines get a little closer together and some of the lines are further apart? That all helps with the illusion, okay? Over here, I've used more of like a pointy, almost like a triangular line, but I didn't finish the bottom of the triangles and I made them look really pointy. So like if you were to touch it, maybe that would hurt. And over here, I started with like an oval and then I drew curved lines around it to create the illusion of like a piece of wood or the wood grain on a piece of wood. Over here, I made small little kind of bumpy rounded shapes, almost like ovals, but not perfect, and kind of stacked them together like rocks in a rock wall. And then I used some other lines and some shading to create some shadows to really make them look a little bit more dimensional. And then here it's just a straight or a diagonal line rather, with more like curved lines coming off of it to create the illusion of the little hairs on a feather. Okay, so we're going to create those together and I'm just going to speed it up. The next element we're going to focus on are forms, and they're very similar to shapes. The only difference is they're three-dimensional. So these are, again, like mathematical shapes and forms, but they're in 3D. So they have width and height like a shape, but they also have a depth. They have a thickness to them. So they're spheres, cubes, cylinders, and cones. So these are solid geometric forms, and we're going to focus on drawing them. And then you're going to want to shade them in so that they look more realistic, like they are sitting on a table. You can put a little cast shadow there. You might want to do the shading after you've practiced your shading on the back page, your value. So if you notice, the sphere is just a basic circle. You just keep sketching it till you get it round. You don't need to draw where the shadow is going to be. I was just like throwing that in there. You don't want a dark outline around your shadow on the table anyway, your cast shadow. Your cylinder starts out more like a rectangle and you round the top. The top is an oval or a flattened ellipse. The sides, the vertical lines have to be straight up and down, and you want to make sure that the bottom is curved. You don't want the bottom to be flat, or the can or the cylinder, whatever rounded cylinder shape you're trying to draw, it won't look round. It has to have this curve on the bottom. Also, your cone shape starts out like a triangle, but instead of a flat bottom, like the geometric shape, you have to curve the bottom as well so that it looks like it's round, okay? And your cube is just almost like a diamond shape here, okay? You want to make sure that your vertical lines stay straight up and down and your horizontal lines are on diagonals. They are parallel to one another. And this is the same shape you're using for the head of your Minecraft character if you're following along with that video. And rectangular prisms are very similar. They're just long and they look more like a shoebox as opposed to an ice cube. Okay, so these are our solid geometric forms. You're going to want to label them. So I would write sphere, cube, cylinder, and cone. And you can even write solid geometric if you want to. The next element of art that we're going to focus on is space. Okay, and space is the area within, around, above, or below an object or objects. Two-dimensional art exists on a flat surface, and if it looks three-dimensional, it's an illusion. Two-dimensional artists use tricks for creating the illusion of depth in their art. Okay, so there's different things that they use. They use size, which is like proportion, overlapping, placement, atmospheric perspective, shading, and linear perspective. We're going to focus on placement, okay, and also size, and also the value. This wasn't really the best example. I was trying to get different shades of blue markers, and I don't have as many different shades here at home. I probably should have painted it or shaded it with my colored pencils. So let's talk about space for a minute. If you have on your paper, first we'll write space, so we know that we're focusing on space, and I'm not talking about outer space, although your artwork could be in outer space. We're talking about the space of the picture plane, the space in your landscape or your still life that's sitting on a table. You're creating depth, okay, so that things look close and things look far away, all right? That's how you create depth. So the closer the object, the larger it is, right? Let's say these balls are all the same size, but if some are far away, they're going to appear smaller further away, and they're going to appear bigger close up. Also, the closer the object, the lower it is on the paper. The further away, the higher it is. That's called a hierarchy. The higher it is placed on the paper. So not only is it smaller, it's way up here. You wouldn't put the small one here, then that would be a smaller circle, okay, or sphere. So we're going to play around with just using spheres or circles, and you're going to show me that you understand placement. Also overlapping. If you overlap one shape behind another, put one in front of it, it definitely looks like this one's in front of that one because you overlapped it, or I overlapped it, okay? So you see the size gets smaller as things get further away, and that creates depth, like I could walk into this little drawing. So let's practice together. So you're going to create one too. Okay, so let's talk about how I started this. I drew a horizon line or a horizon. It could be a table's edge. These objects don't have to be in a landscape. You could have drawn them to look like they're sitting on a table. You don't have to use circles. If you want to use something more fancy like Legos, or you want to get really into your perspective, you could do something like that. I just wanted to go with simple shapes, and then you could shade them in to look like spheres, or you could just color them in like I did here, with the lighter colors back here and the darker colors gradually getting darker as you get closer to the foreground. So this is really called placement, but it's placement overlapping size, okay, and value from light to dark. So I did go into quite a few different tricks that artists use to make things look like they're further away, okay, and closer. You just want to put that horizon line in there. It helps to ground everything. I also, when I colored in, I just used marker. I put some shadows down underneath each object and made it look like the light source was kind of coming from the left. I should put some white colored pencil highlights on the left side of these so that it gives it more dimension. So when we talk about the last element of art that we're going to work on for our little booklet, we're going to talk about value. And when we talk about value in art, we're basically talking about the amount of light on an object or in a work of art. Okay, so you know, to make something look more three-dimensional on a two-dimensional surface, you do need to use shading. That's a technique where you make objects look like the light is hitting at a certain point, and there's going to be some shadow and cast shadow and reflected highlights and things like that. When you start off with value and practicing value, the best thing to do is to create a value scale. We've done these in school in the past, but it's really good to practice them. And I even did one down here in ink with hatching and cross hatching to show you that you can even create value with a pen. It's a little more challenging because if you go too dark too fast, it's really, you can't fix it, especially if it's permanent. So pencil is the best for practice, but then you might want to challenge yourself and do one in ink too. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a 6 value scale, and for us we're going to have 1 be value of white. That's going to stay the white of the paper, and gradually go all the way to 6 and try to get the darkest value out of your pencil that you can for number 6. Then you're going to apply them onto 3 solid objects underneath your value scale. So I chose the sphere, the cube, and the cylinder. So for the first value, you're going to leave it the weight of the paper. For the second value, you are going to lightly color or shade with your pencil to create a very, very light gray. And you're going to use the lightest pressure on your pencil to create that. And you're going to try to do it smoothly. Please don't smudge it with your finger. Okay? You want to try to learn how to control it with your pencil manually. You're gradually going to press harder and harder until the value gets darker, until you get the darkest shade that you can get out of your pencil, the pencil that you're using. each value should gradually get a little darker. Now you're going to apply your value onto some solid forms right underneath your value scale. Remember, whenever you're shading an object, you want to think about the direction that the light is shining on the object. So when you're doing it from your imagination, you have to pick a light source direction. So I drew this little arrow here to remind me that the light is coming in from the left. So the left side is going to stay lighter. The right side will be darker and have my shadow, my core shadow, and my middle tones, my highlight, and my cast shadow will be over here to the right. So there you have it, folks, your Elements of Art pocket notebook with line, shape, color, texture, form, space, and value. When you're all done drawing your booklet, you should take your micron pen or your fine detail pen, outline everything in black so you've created like your own coloring book, and then have fun going back in and coloring and shading your booklet. And then in future projects, we're going to use our Elements of Art book to reflect on when we're creating art. Because remember, the elements of art are the building blocks that artists use to create powerful images. So whether you realize it or not, everything we do in the art room, we're always using the elements of art when we make our artwork. And now I really want you to demonstrate your understanding of these basic elements of art so that you recognize how you're using them with your own artwork. I hope you learned a lot today, and I hope you enjoyed what we did. And have a great day. Until next time. Bye-bye.